There's one more element to do with participles that we need to address, and that is periphrastic participles. The word periphrastic or periphrasis comes from two Greek words, peri meaning roundabout, and phrasis meaning spoken or speech. So a periphrasis is a roundabout way of saying something. Now the way that these periphrastic participles function is to combine with an auxiliary verb, which is a finite verb, to create a roundabout way of saying what a verb form on its own, a synthetic form we call it, can carry by itself. In other words, we have a combination of two words, an auxiliary, usually the verb to be, me, and a participle that combine together to do the same thing that an aorist itself might convey or a present itself might convey. Now, there are certain equations that we need to become familiar with. In fact, you will have already seen some of these as you've been translating your way through Mark's Gospel, chapters 1 to 4, but without necessarily being aware of what was happening. What we're looking for is a verb to be, me, in a finite form, either as an indicative, sometimes as a subjunctive, and a participle in close proximity following it, ideally right after it, but might be separated by a couple of words. When we see this combination, we need to work out what is the combination indicating, and for that we'll look at this table. Periphrastic participles involve me, usually me, it can be other verbs, but it's usually me, with the present, the imperfect, the future, the present, or the imperfect in combination with these participles. So when we have the present form of me plus a present participle, the tense form for translation will be equivalent to a present indicative tense form. If you have an imperfect of me, imperfect indicative, plus a present participle, then the periphrasis is equivalent to an imperfect indicative. If you have the future indicative of me and a present participle, that is equivalent to a future indicative. When we get a present form of me, present indicative, with a perfect participle, that equates a perfect indicative form. And when we have an imperfect indicative of me together with a perfect participle, that equates to a pluperfect periphrasis. Okay, so in case that's not entirely clear, what we're looking at here in this column are the finite forms that the periphrasis is equivalent to. So if you have a present of me plus a present participle, the periphrasis will equate a present finite form. And so it goes on down. Now most of these are fairly easy to remember because the present participle does not affect the tense form. In other words, the tense form is primarily derived from the tense of me. If it's a present indicative of me plus present participle, you get a present periphrasis. If it's a future indicative of me plus present participle, you get a future periphrasis. However, with the following two, the situation is changed so that a present finite form of me plus a perfect participle renders a perfect periphrasis, and the imperfect plus perfect equals the pluperfect. Now you need to become familiar with these, and in the grammar there is a little mnemonic to help you remember these, assigning numerical values to these equations. But for now, just become familiar with the concept, and when you're reading text, you want to keep an eye out for these things. So you're looking for the verb to be in a finite form, usually indicative mood, sometimes subjunctive, followed close thereafter by some kind of participle. And when that occurs, we need to read those two forms together, creating a periphrastic construction or a periphrasis, which is a roundabout way of indicating what a synthetic, a standalone tense form can do on its own. You may ask, well, why do that if a tense form can do this on its own? And the answer is not entirely clear. It seems that periphrastic constructions became more frequent as Greek spanned a wider geographical space. That is, as more and more people spoke Greek through Alexander's empire in the 2nd and 3rd centuries BC, then periphrastic constructions became more popular, probably because it required less memorization of particular strange forms here or there. But the truth is we don't really know why. Some scholars have argued that the periphrastic construction originally conveyed more of a continuous action than their synthetic counterpart, but again, that distinction is largely lost by the time of the 1st century. Suffice to say, there is more than one way to convey the meaning of a synthetic finite verb form, and this alternate way provides another option for speakers and writers who are using the Greek language.